Hi, and welcome to Mancal. Today we're talking about the benefits that foreign investment has for Australia. Now, consider for a minute an Aussie entrepreneur who builds a company from the ground up. They create a whole load of jobs, they buy products and services from other companies, and they end up creating end goods that a whole load of Aussies want to buy, and they create a whole load of wealth in the process. Now, we'd rightly applaud an entrepreneur like that and call them a great Australian. Now, even better, if they then go and take part of their wealth to build a new company, we'd say, hey, even better. But why should it be any different if that entrepreneur was a foreigner, say from China? Would it mean that the jobs they created were somehow less valuable to the people working in them? That the end goods and services were any less desirable to the people who want to buy them? Not at all. That foreign investment can be a real win-win for everyone involved, particularly for Australians. Here in today's seminar, we're going to talk about some of those benefits and how they can come about. Please leave any comments you have at the bottom, and for any questions, get in touch with the Mancal Foundation at mancal.org. Alrighty, so everyone, welcome to today's Mancal seminar on foreign investment. I've subtitled it there as Australia's Lifeline. The reason being that we really couldn't do in this country without foreign investment, and many of the great projects that we rely on have been the result of foreign investors who have been willing to put their own wealth on the line to develop assets that we simply didn't have the resources to develop on our own. Now, it's a hot political issue and one of the most misunderstood ones in public debate. Well, let's run a thought experiment for a minute. Okay, say there's a successful businessman, an Australian. They start up a company, it becomes medium-sized, it grows to being large, then it becomes a massive company. They employ lots of people, they pay lots of wages, support lots of families, buy from a lot of local suppliers, they pay a lot of tax, pay a lot of royalties to the federal government. And everyone will say, hey, what a great Aussie, they've done a lot to support our country, wonderful. Now let's say that they take a part of that wealth and they go and build or buy a second business. You say, well, even better, wow, what a great contributor to our country. Look at all the wealth they're creating, they've done it once, now they're snowballing it into another enterprise, more jobs, more wealth. So what would be the difference then if that entrepreneur happened to be from another country? Maybe they were Norwegian, maybe they were Chinese. Would that mean that the jobs created here are somehow any less? That the goods and services the firm provides are any less valuable to us? The taxes that they pay, the ongoing wealth effects diminish in some way because of the passport that entrepreneur holds? Not at all. There really is no different. Wealth is colourblind in this way. Now, I don't want to sort of go down the track of saying that people who oppose foreign investment are therefore xenophobic. I think it's more just an economic argument, the worry that if people come from outside in that they'll take more away. This whole idea of a set economic pie. And like anything else in economics, so really what happens is you find that pie grows and everyone gets better off. So I want to bust a few of the misconceptions here today. First of all, let's look at who invests in us. There's a lot of controversy about China. When you look at it, China's only down there at number 7, and they're basically 1/10 of the investment of the United States. Now, no one's complaining about the level of investment from the US. No one's complaining about the United Kingdom, tiny Belgium, Japan, a country that we're at war with only a few generations ago, and Hong Kong and Singapore round off at numbers 5 and 6, and it may be that some Chinese investment comes via Hong Kong and Singapore, but really, if we're worried about Chinese investment, it's really not on the radar compared to many other investors. These are the industries that foreign investment comes into in Australia. As you can see, it's really quite concentrated because we do have a fairly specialised economy. Most of it goes into mining, manufacturing, wholesale retail trade, finance and real estate. And that's sort of been rising in political prominence for a time, real estate. But foreign investment in real estate is something that's been going on for a very long time in Australia. The role of China. Now these are 2016 figures and they vary, but we see that their largest current inflows are actually into commercial real estate as of 2016 and infrastructure being number 2, and those make up the lion's share of their FDI. And really that infrastructure one in particular is something where, I'll get to this point in a minute, where we don't have the resources to develop our own infrastructure. I used to work in the UK. I was in a role for quite a while, which was based around getting investment into gas infrastructure in the UK. Now the Chinese fund massive parts, I think most of the gas distribution network in the UK, London in particular. And it's seen as just the thing that's done. There's zero controversy around it. No one talks about it in the papers. Working in the regulator, we sort of have the expectation that, okay, that's how it's done, that's where the investment is coming from next. Why would it go any other way? We're grateful that these people are willing to stump up money for something that we, as the UK government, didn't have the funds to do. And that gets to that point. Why do we need foreign investment? Why can't we do it ourselves? Well, foreign investment fills that gap between what we save and invest every year and what we spend. Total investments funded by domestic savings and foreign investment then makes up that difference. At the end of 2016, total investment flows into Australia stood at $422 billion. There's $377 billion in domestic savings and $45 billion in foreign investments. So $45 billion is a large chunk of money, a bit more than a tenth of the Australian federal government's budget. We wanted to spend it on other things though, so we had to go overseas to get that money that we needed to keep new projects ticking over. And just to labour on this point, this is from the Australian debt clock. We can't afford to invest in ourselves. Total government debt of $738 billion. That's not a net figure, I acknowledge, but the net figure is still large and negative, I'm afraid. And we have a lot of private debt in the private sector as well. We're not swimming in cash looking for somewhere to park it here in Australia. But then, we're a pretty wealthy country. What are the other things that we're spending all our wealth on? Well, one of them is our welfare state. So I think the entire federal budget is about $430 billion. It's about a quarter of GDP. And what they spend at about 25% of GDP is unfortunately 2% more than what they bring in at 23% of GDP. So the government has to borrow 2% of GDP just to make up its own budget. So it doesn't only spend big, it also borrows to do it. It borrows in part from our good friends up in China. That's the country just a couple of generations ago. They suffered famines that killed tens of millions of people. In the interim, they've managed to save and invest enough money so that they can actually fund our excess and our lifestyle spending on welfare. At $164 billion, social security and welfare is the largest item in the federal budget. Health comes next at $75 billion, education at $34 billion. The one that's probably the real worry is interest on debt at $17 billion. a year. We're paying a lot of money just to cover our costs of borrowing before we even pay some of it back. A term you don't really hear much often is the term dole bludger, but 10, 20 years ago it was basically an insult. But when you have a look at assistance to the unemployed and the sick, it's only 10 billion out of 164 billion social security spending. So the large amount actually goes to age spending, families and disabilities. And that disabilities will probably rise quite strongly with the NDIS coming in. So really, I mean, the point here is that this is why we need foreign investment. We can't do it ourselves because we're spending so much on recurrent spending, on lifestyle spending in this country. We're sort of like a bloke who gets paid fortnightly, but he runs out of money after 11 or 12 days and borrows money off his family and friends to get him through the last few days of the fortnight. So, the reasons why foreign investment is good. Well, it can stimulate the target country's economic development, building local industry, and paving the way after that for future investment. Great example here in WA is the Northwest Shelf, developed largely in partnership with Japan, a country at the time that we'd been to a ruinous war with 15, 20 odd years prior. And that then helped lead the way for other resources development in Australia. Business, of course, in the target country receives best practice management, accounting and legal guidance. If you're doing things your own way, often built up from the ground up in your country, you suddenly get the best people coming from overseas with their new ideas and practices that you can then take on. You can incorporate latest technology, latest operational practices, financing tools, and by adopting them, you actually enhance your employees' lifestyles, you raise the standard of living here in Australia, and really FDI, foreign direct investment, it rewards the best companies in any country, and can even reduce the influence of local governments on them. In some cases, the target country can get entirely new industries altogether. Norway in the early 1960s was one. I think it was in 1958, a Norwegian government report came out saying that there was no hope of finding any oil, gas or coal in Norway. So look, it's just not there. Very sorry. We'll have to continue with our fishing and agriculture-based industries. Then within a couple of years they found that actually Norway was one of the greatest oil fields on the planet, and a whole lot of American and English oil firms came in the 1960s, starting with Phillips Petroleum in 1962, I think was the very first. And they then built up Norway's oil industry. At the moment, Australia's going through just that with big data. We don't have big data expertise in this country. It's sort of started up in America and Europe. So you find a lot of big consulting firms, your PwCs and EYs and the like, are now bringing in on 457 visas some experts in big data. And of course they're going to work here, educate and train the people around them. But give it a bit of time and we'll have a great big data industry here in Australia. Second one, foreign direct investment doesn't just stimulate the target country, it actually stimulates global economic interaction. It means that capital goes to the businesses with the best growth prospects anywhere in the world because investors seek the best returns with the least risk. Profit motive is always colourblind. It doesn't care about religion or politics, and once you take off restrictions on foreign investment, you'll see that money go to where it creates the greatest amount of wealth. That means that some firms that were previously protected may find that they lose out when there's a level playing field. But the end consumer ends up better off when the best producers are the ones that receive capital. Means that, well-run businesses are able to use that fact that they're well run as a competitive advantage rather than what country they happen to be incorporated in. Reduces the effects again of politics, corruption, bribery. You may be a local firm that's been able to sort of get politicians on your side, corner the local market. If you're sitting behind a closed tariff wall, it doesn't matter. If there are no restrictions on trade and investment, well, you'll soon find that that capable people will flood in. People that have the ability to produce, to innovate, and they don't need to rely on paying off politicians to do it. And East Asia has really benefited from that in the last 15, 20 years. And goods and services go to market faster than they otherwise would if investment were restricted, and that makes it better off for all of us as consumers. Again, you're putting the focus of economic activity onto the end purchaser and empowering them, rather than choosing a middleman, choosing a particular producer who you decide, well, this guy's going to be the winner because we like him because he's Australian, or he's American, or he's Japanese and he's local, whatever it may be. The winners take all, and the winners are the ones that serve us the best products at the best prices. Otherwise, rather than importing an Apple iPhone, you might be using an Oz phone, which would probably be like one of those clunky old bricks from the 1980s. Okay. Investment really helps open up international trade. Building investment links with other countries, it never stops there. From the Japanese influence in our oil and gas sector, that helped open the way for Japanese manufacturing in Australia. It naturally leads to more trade links, leads to cultural and soft power alliances. Investment brings people close. After investment naturally comes trade. The more interaction you get, the better for the economy, and generally you find the more interaction behind countries, the less likely they are to have any geopolitical spats. So you get a real snowball effect. And having an alliance with foreign investors, of course, we need to think about the other way. If we want to get our products to international markets, well, being allied with large international investors can really open up a greater presence for Australian goods and services on larger international markets. Boosting employment and the economy broadly, as we've seen with the recent mining boom, creates jobs, new jobs, a lot of jobs and high-paid jobs. You get an increase in income, and that means more buying power to local people, which in turn leads to an economic boost. And of course, these companies, they come in to invest, they then pay royalties, they pay taxes in this country, and if those are properly managed by the government, and there's a heavy caveat there, if they're properly managed, then they can create real lasting wealth for Australians. Has Australia really managed royalty and tax revenue well? I'd say not. We talked about Norway. I mentioned that a minute ago, and I'll mention a bit coming up. They've actually done a very good job of it indeed. The next thing, foreign investment, it really helps you develop your human capital resources. That's one of the great advantages of foreign investment. It's often not understood that well because it's not immediately apparent. It's harder to tell that people are being educated, taking on new skills, new attitudes, building new links themselves with people overseas than it is to spot a new big mine or port being built. But human capital, it's that competence and knowledge of the workforce, and the attributes that are gained by training and sharing experience among employees really increase that education and overall human capital of the country. It's not a tangible asset, it's not owned by companies that come in. In fact, it really is a bit of a freebie. It's something that we all pick up by working directly with new firms that invest in Australia, by supplying to them, by interacting with other people who have. And again, Norway in the 1960s to 80s, they made a strategic decision to get all the best people in their country and to send them out to work with oil and gas firms around the world to look at what they were doing, to learn, soak up as much as they could, because Norway didn't have an oil and gas industry. In 1959, they said we don't even have any oil or gas. In 1962, they found out they did, and the American firms came in to start extracting it. Norway said, right, but this is good, but let's get our people on the inside learning, let's skill them up, and let's build industries here in this country. And they did it very, very well. Now, Statoil, which is Norway's state-owned oil firm, it's one of the world's biggest oil and gas companies, and Norway has $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund for a country of about 5 odd million people, I think. That's a lot of money. Transferring resources. Again, foreign investment allows resource transfer and other exchanges of knowledge, where countries are given access to new technologies and new skills. That's sort of related to that human capital aspect that I mentioned then, but more of a hard technology and skills sense. So you bring in the best technology, the best hard technology, actual equipment, but you also bring in processes, bring in ideas, ways of managing, understandings. You get a lot of real skills that you simply wouldn't otherwise be able to extract if that foreign investor hadn't come in. Or you can go about it the Norwegian way, by putting your people around the world to extract those skills, which is all very good and well, but takes a very long time. Foreign investors come in with their ways of doing things, we can pick them up immediately. Now this is one of the things, and people complain about, say, Chinese firms buying up farmland in Australia. They haven't bought up that much. Other nationalities own more than the Chinese do. I always say, well, if people don't like the idea of China buying a farm, well, why don't you go and buy it? Yeah, there's a farmer that wants to sell, probably been in the family for generations. The old farmer's hitting retirement age. Kids don't want to take over the farm. What's he going to do? Is the farm just going to lay waste and go to dust? Then you get these nice people calling in from America, England, Belgium, France, Japan, China, wherever they may be. They want to come and give them a nice big bucket of money just to sell up. So what a bunch of sort of city-based people, what gives them the right to say, oh no, you can't do that because we don't like the idea of someone else owning that asset? Well, put your money where your mouth is, or otherwise you don't really have much of a call on this transaction here. But what people forget is that when a foreign investor comes in and purchases an asset, it's very easy to see in land. Well, what happens when people buy land? The value of surrounding land goes up. So you find that all of a sudden there's new hope for other farms being bought in that area. You've got then greater ability for local suppliers to make more of a living because, well, there's a new farming operation coming online. You may find that more infrastructure may be built in the area that others can then leverage off and share. Again, the problem is when you assume that there's just a pie that can't be grown and everyone has to take their piece of it and battle for it, you end up with this zero-sum game and looking to lay blame. But wealth, fortunately, that's not the way that wealth works. And by welcoming foreign investors, we can add value to what we're already doing here. And one of the big issues at the moment, more in the eastern states than here, is on residential housing, and the idea that given that's a non-productive, depreciating asset, is it worthwhile having a lot of investment in it? For that reason, there's a ban on foreigners buying established housing in Australia. You have to purchase new build properties, such as in your apartment, and there are effects on local home ownership, particularly again in Sydney and Melbourne, and it's worth considering in a way. Look, having a big flood of investment in residential property, is that worth the effects it can have on young people who end up paying more for a family home, may as a result wait longer to begin a family, they may find it harder to accumulate spare capital to start a business or invest and so forth. They're always, you don't want to be a zealot on these things, but what you do want to do is try and find a good common ground where you can have a win-win for both sides, where foreign investment can come in, can create real wealth that is shared between both sides and doesn't have any unintended consequences in the target country. Increased productivity, again, foreign investment helps increase the productivity in the target country, and that touches again on the human capital, the technological transfer, resources transfer. It increases productivity in that target country, and again, also in a way to touch on one of the earlier points of the best capital going to the best resources. It makes us all more competitive here and competitive for that present of foreign investment. We find when there's a lot of money on the table from people eyeing off our country, it'll lift up the game of domestic companies who are all looking to compete to attract foreigners in. And who benefits from increased productivity? Workers and consumers. And of course, foreign investment lets us all get richer. It has, it does, it'll continue to in the future. So just to finish, I want to highlight that this is a big advantage of foreign investment. It's why we do it. It increases the target country's income. Full stop. That's the purpose of it. You get more jobs, higher wages, national income increases, economic growth rises. Foreign investment, it really is a real win-win for everyone involved. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. The investors wouldn't take all that time, all that effort, spend all that risk to do it. We wouldn't let them in if it clearly wasn't in our interest. And we really need to get out of this mindset that foreign investors come here and take our wealth, that there's that set pie and someone we don't know is going to come and take a piece of that pie away. That's really akin to this sort of an attitude of times gone by of sort of colonisers, mercantilists from hundreds of years ago. Go to South America, go to Africa, take the resources, treat the local people badly and go back home and leave less than when they arrived. That's not how foreign investment in productive assets and goods and services works. So the purpose is that we can each offer something that the other needs, and hey, we all end up being a lot better off.